Well, hello and welcome to Block Game. My name is Roger Janik. I'm your host, and today's episode is called Kick Butt Cryptopreneurs. And in this episode, we are going to interview an entrepreneur that's in the crypto and blockchain space. And I'm really excited to have this guest with us today. His name is Jonathan Kaplan. I actually met this fellow not too long ago at a Bitcoin conference in Austin. Really sharp guy. I was super impressed. And he's doing his own thing in the crypto world, the crypto space. So today we're going to get to know Jonathan. We're going to find out what he's into, what he's all about, what his company's doing, what is their future, what's their roadmap look like, and see what we can learn, not just about Jonathan, but from Jonathan, to kind of help us all out in this crazy crypto world we're living in right now. Just briefly, well, first of all, I guess just say hello, Jonathan.
Hey guys, thanks for having me here, Roger. It's a very exciting time to be talking crypto, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on the show.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. We're glad to have you. Just a brief intro. Jonathan is a graduate of UT, and he owns a company called Numeris Capital, which is a crypto investment fund. And if I say any of this wrong, Jonathan, you can feel free to correct me, but it's a hedge fund.
So far, so good.
Okay, great. And he started this back in 2016 when a lot of, I think, friends and family and colleagues were asking him to help invest their crypto assets, and they were asking him for advice. So I think that's kind of where it organically started from, trying to fulfill that need for people he knew, and he decided to start his own company. So he's got that entrepreneurial spirit, which we love, and I really want to learn about. So far, so good, Jonathan. Is that accurate?
Yeah, the firm was actually started in 2017, but I had been helping friends and family to navigate the cryptocurrency markets since I got in late 2015 when I discovered Bitcoin, and I just wouldn't stop talking about it. And eventually it got to the point where people were just like, hey, you seem to know a lot more about this than I do. And hey, if you're obsessed with it and you're making money, well, here's a check, and let me know how we do. And then that just kind of kept building on itself and building until eventually I talked to a lawyer, and he said, well, you gotta form a proper company. You just can't be accepting checks into your personal bank account and do it. So it was a very organic start. I think it was Warren Buffett who has a quote like, you shouldn't start a business unless people are asking you to. And that's pretty much what happened. And we've just been growing organically from referrals and, from fine folks like you that are willing to put me up on YouTube. So it's been a very exciting ride.
No, that's great. And so let's just kind of dive into it, Jonathan. You've been doing this thing now for a little over a year. So how's that going, and how has the journey been thus far? And was it scary for you to take that leap into this entrepreneurial world? Of course, I don't know your background too much, if you've already been an entrepreneur in the past, but I just want to know, what it took for you to have the courage and guts to make that move, and how it's been going for you so far.
It's a good question. It's been surreal, I think would be the best way to say it. It almost something where you wake up and you look around at all these different things that are happening in the world of crypto, and you just go, wow, I can't believe that that's happening. I have a business background. I attended the Macomb School of Business at UT Austin, and I majored in information systems. I wasn't quite brave enough to go full computer science, but I knew that I was interested in technology and interested in the intersection of business and technology. And so I had, I think, the useful background when it came to being able to really understand the full impact that Bitcoin and decentralized crypto assets would have on the world. And so I think it was particularly helpful that I started business school in the fall of 2008 when the global financial system was on the verge of collapse. And as an 18-year-old who didn't really understand much about the world, or certainly the world economy, I was very curious as to how we had gotten to a point where it seemed like the world was going to end. And so I started digging more and more into, exactly how our financial system works. And I started reading the history of finance and the history of money. And, the deeper I dug into it, the more I realized that we had built a very fragile system. And I think that's evident in the '08 crisis, the 2000 dot-com bubble, the savings and loans issue. a million different examples you can pull out where you look at the system we have and you go, it just doesn't seem like that's going to work out for the long term. And so when I stumbled on Bitcoin, it was by far the brightest light bulb moment I'd ever had. And I just became obsessed with it. It's such a phenomenal.
That's what really inspired you to make that move and make that jump whenever you started really diving into Bitcoin and the whole crypto world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that caught my eye, I discovered Bitcoin because I use a website called Goodreads to log all the books that I read, and it's sort of an engine that'll recommend you new books based on the things that you've liked, and it recommended me Digital Gold because
what's the name of that again, so the audience will hear it?
The book is called Digital Gold by Nathaniel Popper, and it's
what was the tool you were using though?
Oh, the website's called Goodreads, GOODREADS.
Okay.
It's sort of like your own personal digital library where you can keep track of, well, here's the books that I want to read and here's the books that I have read. And it's got, kind of like Netflix will recommend you movies. So too will that website recommend you books. And it recommended me this book on Bitcoin. And I started reading it. And at first it was this idea of a digital scarcity that can't be inflated. And I knew enough about fiat currencies to, be interested in investing in gold and precious metals and things that a central government can't simply inflate the value away. And it wasn't maybe until about 9 or 10 months later when I started catching up on some of the ongoing developments in the crypto ecosystem, not just related to Bitcoin, but I started reading more about Ethereum and Monero and the privacy coins, that I saw that there was so much more to Bitcoin and crypto than simply an additional asset that I could have as part of my portfolio, that Bitcoin was the start of this entirely new financial ecosystem. And I had always been a little jaded and cynical when it came to our existing financial system, which to that point in my mind, it was like a game that even if you really hate the game and the odds are stacked against you, you have no choice but to play that game because it's the only game in town. And with Bitcoin and the crypto ecosystem, suddenly there's a new game that's not built on rules that were developed by a handful of political and economic elites, but a system based on transparency and the open source ethos of the internet. And
and that's kind of what made you, is that what caught the fever? Is that why you caught the fever when you...
That's exactly it. You tumble down the rabbit hole, and it just, every time you think that you've gone about as far as you can go, it just goes so much deeper.
Yeah.
And
it's
exciting to be able to wake up every day and to read about all the developments that are going on. And then as the virus spreads, so to speak, you've got all these really smart people from Silicon Valley or Wall Street or, here in Texas, we've got these, crypto hubs that are popping up in Austin and Houston. And it's just amazing to watch a ton of really smart people start building really incredible things that I think are going to.
Yeah, it really is the revolution, isn't it? It's
right.
I think once most people get into it, start learning about whether it's cryptocurrencies or blockchain technology, when they really start to dive into it, they realize that something clicks. And they're like, oh, wow, this is the new revolution. This is comparable to the age of the computer or the age of the internet, right? This is the next big technological revolution. And it sounds like you definitely know that. And that's probably what really got you excited into it. Same for myself, So.
And everybody's got a story like that. There's nobody that I know of, at least, who says, yeah, I found Bitcoin and I bought a little and then I went about my day. It's always, I found Bitcoin and I spent 6 months locked in my room reading about it, and now I'm obsessed with it.
Or they bought Bitcoin and forgot about it, and then a few years later, they're like, oh, well, it's worth how much? And then I better look into this whole crypto thing. So, but it's kind of neat because, Bitcoin is a bit of that catalyst that is, migrating people from, or migrating people into adoption, right? It's, people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of Bitcoin. What's that all about? And then it just opens up it peels back the onion layers, right? And it gets deeper and deeper and deeper into, oh, blockchain, what's that all about? And, most of my conversations kind of go that way. You've heard of Bitcoin, right? I'm like, yeah. They're like, well, let me tell you about the real revolution and how people are now building software applications on top of the blockchain. And they're like, well, what's blockchain? Oh, well, it started with Bitcoin. And so you have to kind of go through all that and explain it all.
It's difficult sometimes because conceptually the idea of Bitcoin or of a blockchain is a combination of so many different fields. You have to understand a little bit about computer programming and, database management and cryptography and economics and finance and game theory and human psychology. And so and I could probably just keep going on for another, dozen fields, but
it's not for the faint of heart to get into it right now. It's still a really big learning curve when it comes to blockchain technology in itself. Now, you can still just be a crypto investor, right? And I think that's the easiest way personally for the general public to get into is just become a crypto investor. Even that's not super simple unless you're on the right trading platform that makes it simple, right? But this is a perfect segue into that conversation about crypto investing, right? And how to make money in crypto. And that's where you come in. That's where Numeris Capital comes in. So let's talk a little bit about Numeris Capital and y'all's core competencies and what your vision is and what you're doing for folks out there.
Sure. Well, so Numeris Capital was started in, we received our legal green light December 1st of 2017. So the fund has been live for about 6 months. And we are really focused on those retail investors, small family offices, high net worth individuals who fall into a couple of areas. They either don't have the technical expertise to really be able to understand how to secure their private keys and how to send crypto to various addresses. And it can be really difficult for someone who doesn't have a competent tech background really to even be able to get started. So for the folks that maybe have read about Bitcoin or crypto, in the Wall Street Journal, or they see it on TV and they go, well, I'd like to invest in that. But, man, I'm 65 years old and I can barely open my email without losing half my net worth to a Nigerian scammer. Maybe I should outsource that. Right. And or folks who simply don't have the time because, this is a 24/7, 365 market where the bell doesn't ring at 4:30 and you don't get weekends off and it moves like 100 times faster than the stock market. So there's a lot of folks who go, well, you know what? Like I could do that, but I've got a full-time job and a family and hobbies.
I want a life.
Right, exactly. And, I don't have a life.
So they pay you to not have a life. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly, you stole my joke. I was going to say, I don't have a life because this is my life, which I love. And so there's a lot of people who would simply rather write us a check and pay us a small fee and then not have to worry about any of this, as well as people, we've got clients that have had funds stolen from them or that managed to send their Bitcoin to a Bitcoin Cash address and lost money, and folks that go, well, you know what? It's still a very difficult infrastructure to navigate. And so
what kind of protections, for example, someone's going to put their trust and their money in your company. What kind of safeguards or protections do you have in place for the same reasons, right? The same fears that they have.
Well, and it's a really good question. And I understand the irony of providing as a third party a service in an industry which is really in large part centered around the elimination of third parties. And, we often tell folks, don't leave your tokens on an exchange because you're not supposed to leave your private keys with someone else. You're supposed to control your own private keys. And so I don't think as a society we're quite there yet. And we've got, a full prospectus that has at least a couple of pages dedicated to the fact that, we don't leave our tokens on an exchange. Well, when we take a position, we'll have, a stop loss. And then once it's been enough time to where we're in enough profit to where we don't feel the need to have the possibility of maybe exiting that position, then, we'll have IP whitelisting, address whitelisting, hardware wallets, air-gapped computers. I mean, we take capital preservation as our number one priority. So as a fund, there are funds out there that they'll invest you in every ICO, or they'll take 100% of your money and they'll just go completely into, an index of the top 50. And that's not really what we're trying to do.
So let's talk about that. Tell me about how y'all are different from, two perspectives, right? Like how are you different from a typical hedge fund, right? And then how are you different from other competitors in the crypto space, other hedge funds in the crypto space?
Sure. So, It's hard to even call us a hedge fund because there's not that many ways to hedge in the crypto space. That tends to be sort of just
So it's
a
more of an
phrase.
investment group or investment fund, or how would you say it?
I would say the crypto asset investment fund.
Okay.
What we try to do is essentially provide a broad exposure to the crypto market as a whole. So we're not an index because, well, it's hard to be an index in the crypto space because if you take, say the top 20 or the top 50, it changes so frequently, the turnover is so quick that it's difficult to even peg to an index in the first place. And then, of course, you're going to pick up the crap and the Ponzi's and the BitConnects. And so first and foremost, we help people to navigate the infrastructure, to secure their private keys, to preserve their capital. We are a rather conservative fund. We're not fully invested into the market right now. I'm not yet convinced that this rally isn't a bull trap. So we are willing to play it safe more often than not. We're not Bitcoin maximalists. We're not any sort of maximalist. So we're not focused, just on smart contracts or just on straight cryptocurrencies or just on privacy coins. We do try to have broad exposure to a variety of different asset types, whether they're straight cryptocurrencies or what folks would call crypto commodities or security tokens or stable coins. So we do have a diverse portfolio in the sense that we try to expose our investors to what we would think are important parts of the crypto asset ecosystem. But at the same time, we do utilize a barbell strategy where we are heavily weighted towards what I would call sort of the blue chip cryptos, the highly liquid, the older assets that have a more proven track record, the Bitcoins, the Ethereums, the Moneros.
Okay.
So that'll be 80% of our capital where we'll dedicate it to just the best assets in the space where it's a bit more of a track record of crypto whole.
So although crypto is extremely volatile, that's more of a conservative route, I guess you could say, for investments, right? Even it's hard to even say the word conservative when you're investing in crypto, period, right? But it sounds like if you're going to, you guys are playing it a little more safe than on the aggressive route, right?
That's pretty much it. We're looking for folks who are wanting to diversify maybe 1% to 2% of their overall portfolio into crypto. And so in that 1% to 2% of their portfolio, 80% of their funds are going to be in the best cryptos, the most liquid. If we need to get out of a position, that's going to be easy. And then 10 to 20% of the portfolio is the younger projects, the higher risk, higher reward, very select ICOs. Some of the, I guess I would just say riskier projects, because I don't think you can get a higher return without taking on more risk. I think that's just an investing principle. But I recognize that if you're interested in the crypto space, you're probably willing to take a few more liberties with that small percentage of your portfolio. It should be money that you're willing to lose. And so, like I said, we're trying to provide a broad exposure to all of the crypto space. Most of your money is going to be invested into projects that maybe you're not going to see a 100x, but maybe 5 to 10. And then a little bit of the money will go into more of a VC style investing where we're going to look at very select ICOs or very select small cap projects that do have that potential to go to 100x. But, hey, if they don't work out, well, that's why it's 80-20 and not the other way around.
Right. So you mentioned something that you said 1% to 2% is what you're recommending. Can you repeat that again? Because for the listeners out there, they're thinking about getting into this and thinking about investing. Maybe they have some extra cash to do so, some money to play with, right? What do you typically recommend that how much?
It's a really good question. It's hard to give a blanket answer because it should be very much tailored to the individual and their particular financial situation. I work with a lot of our fraternity alumni that are older and more established. And there's a big difference between somebody that's, 58 years old and they have, children that have already graduated from college and they've got an empty nest and, they don't know and they're out of debt. They can take a lot more risks than, somebody who's 25 and they just graduated and they've got, $50,000 in student loans and they're playing around with like weekend beer money. So the only blanket suggestions I really can give are, rule 1 is never invest more than you can afford to lose. And then rule 2 is, don't invest money that you're going to need arguably within the next 12 months, because with the
How about turn beer into Bitcoin? How about Take your beer money and put it in Bitcoin.
Well, I'm more of a red wine kind of guy. So
Okay.
I would absolutely tell people that if you weren't to do that a couple of years from now, you're going to be looking back and thinking, wow, that's some expensive beer that I was drinking.
Yeah.
Putting that money into Bitcoin.
Just think about it. If, instead of the 6-pack you may buy once a week or whatever, and you put that in Bitcoin, how much money you might have in a few years. It's kind of crazy to even think about it.
And that's a great way to do it. Our minimum is $25,000, and that's, I understand it's higher than, what a lot of folks might be able to afford. That's the lowest we could go with still being able to pay all of our bills. But
your fees are competitive, right? Compared, I don't know how much you want to talk about that today, but competitive compared to a traditional fund.
Right. Well, the typical hedge fund fee structure is 2 and 20, and we charge 1.5 and 15. We run a very, a lean startup kind of model. We don't have employees. We don't have an office. I work from home. Most of what I do is just rent books from the library and read white papers online. None of that costs a lot of money, so I can pass along those savings to our clients. But for the folks that can't afford a service like Numeris, I would recommend basically what you said. Hey, if you've got some money at the end of every week, $20, $50, whatever it is that you can absolutely afford to lose and forget about, dollar cost averaging into a few select high quality crypto assets, 50-50 Bitcoin and Ethereum is what I recommend for most people who they want to have skin in this game, but they don't have the time to do any research or learn anything. I help them understand what hardware wallets are. And then I tell them, look, buy some Bitcoin, buy some Ethereum, and then come back in a year and we'll see what happens. And for the most part, I think that's been working out pretty well.
That's great. Do you have like a really good success story that you could share with us, even without, mentioning people's names? Do you have something you'd be willing to share with us today?
In terms of the folks that have invested in Numeris?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so I've told you that I work with a couple of folks, and I won't give out their names, of course, but that have been hacked or have lost funds due to simply not being technically competent. And they come to us, they said, look, I tried to do this myself and I just couldn't do it. And so we've been able to help them out a ton. Okay. And, simply knowing that their money's in better hands than it was with them, they've been very happy. I think probably the most interesting story we've had so far is that we started in December of 2017. And at that point, prices were getting pretty extended. And there was very much a ton of, I think, what people would acknowledge as dumb money. Folks that were flooding in because they thought that they were going to get rich quick and they didn't do any of their research. They didn't know a single thing about trading or investing. And they were hoping that they just buy some Bitcoin and double their money. And so when we started the fund, we were basically in cash. We bought a little bit of Bitcoin to play around with an algorithmic trading bot we were working on. But other than that, we were 95% in cash. And we were seeing all-time highs day after day. And I kept getting letters from clients that said, look, I didn't give you my money so that you could leave it sitting in the bank. I gave you it so that we could put it into crypto. And for about a month and a half, every day or so, I was getting phone calls and texts. And I told people, look, this is a marathon, not a sprint. And then, of course, the market topped out shortly after that.
Yeah,
it took a pretty brutal 70 to 80% correction. And within the last couple of weeks, I've had quite a few emails that were people saying, hey, thank you for putting up with my angry letter or email or text message back in January.
So when all of this big, bear market happened and this downturn happened here in the beginning of 2018, did your clients freak out? Did they bail on you, or did you tell them to hold tight? How did that look for you?
No, we've never had a client leave Numeris. We've been in operation less than a year, but so far,
but still,
they were happy. I am not very experienced in shorting, so we didn't go short. Which, if I'm being honest, we probably should have looked closer into that. I don't like the idea of shorting crypto. I think we're still in an overall bull trend. I think this was a very brutal correction, but I'm not quite sure I'd call it a bear market.
I feel like it moves too damn fast, honestly. You have to really know what you're doing to short it. You've got to be a really savvy day trader to ride these dips because they're so fast. Wouldn't you say?
That's absolutely true. And you never know when there's going to be, the Bitcoin cash pump back in December is a great example. I'm bearish long-term on Bitcoin cash. And I don't think anybody ever would have expected that it would have been added to Coinbase and then in the same day go up how many hundreds of percentages. So that was sort of an interesting moment where I said, that can happen any day in crypto. Somebody releases a partnership or a new announcement or a new wallet or an airdrop or a fork, and before you know it, they're up 50, 100%. So in terms of shorting and having, a unlimited potential for losses, but only a limited amount of potential gain, that's not normally a trade I'm interested in making. But I think that they were quite pleased to see that, we just started taking positions a few weeks ago. The fund isn't fully invested. So, we're up 3 or 4% right now, but that's in a market which is still across the board down 40 or 50.
Yeah. And so as of today, it's May the 4th, 2018. May the 4th be with you.
And also with you.
I just had to throw that in there. I'm definitely a Star Wars fan. You can probably see the tchotchkes, the memorabilia.
I just noticed R2-D2
behind me.
Very nice.
Big fan. So May 4th, 2018, right? So things are definitely on the upswing the last couple of weeks. Finally, it's been brutal, really brutal the last few months since the beginning of 2018. This huge correction, like you said, everything's down 60 to 70% from where it was at in December of 2017. I'd like to know what your prediction is on the market itself. Like, where do you think it's going short term, long term? And then even further than that, do you feel like a cryptocurrency is actually going to make it? Like, it's going to be adopted mainstream where people will actually be using a cryptocurrency? Or will we only be riding this new blockchain technological revolution with software dApps, decentralized applications? I mean, what are your thoughts on the future?
I'm going to try to answer that in a way that doesn't take 3 hours because it's a great question and it's so broad. At this moment, I think it's about 50-50 whether this is a temporary rally that sort of peters out. And then I was hoping to see more sideways consolidation. I think that's healthier to see, Bitcoin consolidate within a channel for a while and then go up slowly. The guys that are new to crypto love the days when they buy something and then the next day it's up 50%. And I don't like that as an investor because I just know there's going to be a crazy pullback and, give me 1% a day forever and I'll be happy. But,
right.
So in the short term, cautiously optimistic. I think for the rest of 18, I'm fairly confident that we're going to end the year either close to or surpassing all-time highs. And then long term, I'm about as bullish as you can be. I think that what we've been seeing since Bitcoin was created are a series of, and you can see this if you look at the price history of Bitcoin, and it applies to the cryptocurrency markets as a whole now, but Bitcoin has grown in a fractal pattern where every cycle looks similar to what you could call a hype cycle, what actually is called a hype cycle, where you see this crazy rally where people think that, oh my God, there's this new technology and it's going to cure cancer overnight. And then when it inevitably doesn't do that, it crashes back down, but then it consolidates and then, a new group of people find it whenever it crashes, but then it doesn't die. I think there's a whole bunch of people that were watching that last rally from the sidelines and they go, that Bitcoin thing, oh no, it's dead now. Oh, wait a second. It's 3 months later. Bitcoin's not dead. Oh, wow, it's turning around. And then the people who didn't participate last time start actually looking into it. And they go, wow, that thing that I thought was just a pyramid scheme, well, maybe there's more to it because it's been going on for a decade now. And that maybe I need to take a look into it. And so I think last year was a cycle where retail discovered crypto and you had a lot of mom and pops and average investors, people like myself that were just, reading blogs and forums on the internet, watching YouTube videos, stuff like this, got into it. And then I think now Wall Street's waking up. And I think this next cycle is going to see big money come in. And then I think we might even have a cycle after that where Bitcoin could potentially, or another asset, but I think eventually we'll see a crypto asset become a worldwide reserve currency and nations will start picking up.
What's gonna be the catalyst to make that happen? Like to start that full public mainstream adoption of cryptocurrencies or a cryptocurrency? Like, what do you think will be that tipping point that will get us there to where it's truly adopted?
In the short term, I would guess an ETF. I think that if because right now I think the hardest part about this is really, like I said earlier, being able to navigate the infrastructure and having to deal with, confusing address names and all the various types of wallets. And,
Right.
there's so many different technical errors and things that you can do wrong. I think having an ETF and providing easier custody options is going to really
explain quickly to the audience. Explain ETF, if you would.
So it stands for Exchange Traded Fund. It's basically, imagine instead of having to go through all the rigmarole of signing up for exchange accounts and creating a wallet and transferring your tokens, if you could buy some Bitcoin, just like you could log into your E-Trade or Scottrade or whatever account and, buy a little Bitcoin that way. And we've got, I forget what it is exactly. It's the Bitcoin Trust, I think, GBTC, where you can do that, but there's a premium. It's not perfect. And so I think that providing easier options for older folks who don't want to deal with the technology, that's going to help out a lot. And then, like I mentioned earlier, I think that in the United States, it's difficult to get your average person to really understand the value prop of Bitcoin or a lot of other cryptocurrencies, because we live in a very special country where we have a fully functioning financial system and a relatively stable currency, and everybody has easy access to checking accounts and lines of credit. But you step outside of the US, you go to a place like Venezuela, and you realize how important sound money is and how it's a matter of life and death in very many places around the world. And I think it's only a matter of time before some of these countries like Zimbabwe or Venezuela that have seen catastrophic results of their failed monetary policies eventually say, well, we're just going to throw in the towel and start buying some Bitcoin and use it in place of our reserves, or we're going to start, providing for better adoption. And I think that that's just going to be the spark that sets off, the worldwide race to, and again, maybe it's not Bitcoin, but I think it will be some sort of cryptocurrency that. Right now, we live in a world where governments can print as much money as they want, and that's not a great way to run an economy. And it's only a matter of time before this idea makes its way into the heads of everybody else in the rest of the world, because it's simply a superior option. It's just
the one thing we know right now is the quick way to grab money is to do token raises, right? And so some of these countries, selling tokens, right? They know that they can get billions of dollars in quickly. So even if they don't end up adopting and using the tokens themselves, right now they know it's a money grab because investors are putting, like as you said earlier, dumb money into this, right? So would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, I mean, we've already seen a situation like that where Venezuela created their own cryptocurrency called the Petro, and from what I haven't looked too deeply into it, I don't want to invest into anything that the Venezuelan government is sponsoring, but it seems to be about what you would expect, a complete flop. But it's a step in the direction that I would expect, which is to see state level actors and governments start to take this seriously as a tool or a resource or as a legitimate technology. This is no longer the purview of people who want to buy pot on the dark web or something like that.
Right. Yeah. No, and you're right. I think you hit on a good point there. And, the typical, the everyday person, right, that you talk to, your friends and your family that aren't really into this space and don't know much about it, they hear Bitcoin. A lot of times they think dark web or criminal elements, or they think Silk Road. They've heard about hackers, right? And it's still got the negative connotation, but once they start really diving into it and reading up on it, and it's really a whole new thing and a whole new revolution, right? So,
right.
So what else? So you're bullish, right? So it sounds like you're bullish on the future of cryptocurrencies and blockchain.
I think so. I'm not a maximalist of any sort. I think it behooves good investors to never get emotionally attached to their assets. One of my favorite movie lines is from Heat, where the protagonist says, "Don't become too attached to anything that you can't walk away from in 30 seconds if you feel the heat coming around the corner." Mm-hmm. And it's a phenomenal movie if you haven't seen it, but I really like that idea. And what's really interesting to me is that now that you have thousands of crypto tokens, and out of those, I would say several dozen or hundred are, more or less legitimate in that there may be real projects that are actually trying to accomplish something and not just straight up scams or Ponzi's or whatnot. And what's really interesting is that you can see the same sort of innate human tribalism that you see when, people become really attached to their country or their religion or their football team. Here in Texas, football might as well be a religion. And you can see that same sort of tribalism taking effect in the crypto space, where especially once you buy into a project and you're not just emotionally or intellectually attached, but you're financially invested, it becomes very hard to separate your emotions from your, logical analysis of, well, I'll give you an example. So I had a friend who was very invested in Litecoin, and I've never really thought much of Litecoin as a project. It's a copy and paste of Bitcoin. It's basically a test net for Bitcoin. And when Charlie Lee, the creator of Litecoin, sold all of his tokens back in December at roughly the peak, coincidentally.
Yeah, lucky on that. Didn't
I had never liked the project, but at that moment I was like, well, now I definitely don't like it. And I remember talking to my friend, and I said, hey, how would you feel if, Elon sold all of his Tesla stock? And he said, well, I probably wouldn't be into the project. And I said, well, did you hear Charlie Lee just sold all of his Litecoin? And he was like, oh, I'm sure he must have a good reason. And Litecoin's the best, and Litecoin forever, Litecoin to the moon. And
I think his reasoning was that he didn't want to make it look like he was trying to manipulate the value of the coin in any way, and that's, or pump it in any way. I think that's why he's like, I'm just going to be free and clear of it. I'm going to sell it, but I'm going to promote it without anybody thinking I have an agenda. I mean, wasn't that his rebuttal to it?
That was his argument, was that it was a conflict of interest for him to hold the token and to be promoting it and to also be involved in the development. I find it interesting that, Litecoin is several years old. And so, for 3 years, when Litecoin was $4, it wasn't a conflict of interest. Suddenly, when it's at all-time highs, oh, yeah.
That's a good point. You hit on a good point there. So we'll probably
pretty convenient.
For sure. But
But it was just, I could pull a million examples of how, I don't think that Bitcoin and Ethereum are direct competitors. Ethereum's a smart contract network, and Bitcoin is sound money. And there are Ethereum proponents that argue that it could eventually become a store of value and serve as, a reserve asset and things of that nature. But I've always just been a little, the Numeris is long Bitcoin and Ethereum, and I think they're both phenomenal projects, and I think they're both going to do great things. And I've never understood the animosity between them. And I forget where I read it, but somebody once postured in a book, I think it was maybe Will Durant, The Lessons of History, where he says, the only way you'll ever get every human being on the planet to come together and support each other is if aliens were to attack the Earth. And suddenly you have something that unites everybody from every country and every nationality and every race, sex, religion, whatever. And I almost think that the only way that you'll ever see crypto investors and programmers and devotees unite is when there's, some sort of maybe a government attack or a state level attack on crypto. But until then, I don't think you're going to see a lot of these camps working together. And it's such a shame because, the Bitcoiners spend so much time fighting with Bitcoin Cash when what they really ought to be fighting are, the corrupt governments and the central banks and the fiat currency.
It kind of reminds me of like Apple versus PC, right?
Yes, exactly. Right.
That old war of Apple versus Microsoft or something. It's just silly, right? I mean,
well, because there's obvious use cases for PCs, and then there's obvious cases for Macs. And again, people will, instead of acknowledging that or saying, well, maybe I have a Mac for creative work and I've got a PC where I'm doing a whole lot of technical stuff.
I have both. I'm talking to you on a PC laptop right now, but during the day I'm always on my Mac desktop, so.
Right.
But people like to compete. People like to be competitive. People like to think that what they've chosen is the best, right? And that's just the spirit of humanity, right, to be in competition. But, you hit on something. I've heard the alien analogy before of like that's the one thing that could unite the whole world. But, honestly, if you think about it, there is one thing that is kind of starting to unite the entire world right now, and that is blockchain. That is the blockchain technology, right? So, and it's already happened in the past. So, we had the Gutenberg printing press, right, that started the whole the print revolution. We have computers. The internet itself has made the whole world one smaller, closer global village, right? And that's kind of united us. But now blockchain and blockchain technology, I think, is uniting the world. And it may take it a step further by tying our infrastructures together on this one global ledger, right? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a very astute observation. It's a great way of putting it. Andreas Antonopoulos is a Bitcoin developer, author, speaker, guru, phenomenal guy. For those who haven't seen him, he's got a lot of YouTube videos out, which are just absolutely mind-blowing. And he has a book about Bitcoin called The Internet of Money. And I would use that to describe most of the crypto sphere, not just Bitcoin. But I think that it's a great way of saying it because it really is an extension of the internet. And what we saw with the connectivity that the internet brought was that suddenly you were not limited to interactions with the people in your community, not your neighbors or the people that you worked with, but suddenly you could be talking to somebody on the opposite side of the world for free instantaneously. And suddenly there was the propensity for folks to feel more connected with people who maybe shared similar passions or interests, but were located in other time zones or states or countries, and not necessarily to the people that they just happen to be next door neighbors with. And I think you're starting to see, because crypto it's built on top of the internet, it's an extension of the internet. And so that same ethos of use the internet to find those people who are into the things that you're into and that want to accomplish the same things you want to accomplish. There's a web form for anything, man. Like no matter what you're into, there's a group of people on the internet that are into that same thing. And I think that with crypto, you're seeing that as well. It doesn't matter if you live, in the middle of nowhere, rural Montana. If you've got an internet connection, you can be a part of a global movement of people who are passionate about something that supersedes any sort of boundary, and that I think is helping to unite the world in a way that I think very few of us would have expected even just a couple of years ago.
Well said, man. Well said. I think that's actually a great place to end this because I feel like you and I could probably go on for hours and hours and hours.
I'm sure we could.
which is fine by me, but at some point we got to end it. But it gives us a good excuse to have you back on. I'd love to have you back on, and we could continue further.
Anytime. Well, with as quickly as crypto moves a couple of months from now, I'm sure we'll still have plenty to talk about.
Yeah, exactly. I'd love to recap. And that's why I wanted to get your prediction on the future too. And you're very bullish on crypto. So it's going to be really cool to have you back in a few years, and either you can brag about how astute and amazing you are, or you can eat crow and, admit you're wrong. But actually, I'm tending, well, I don't know where I'm at. I'm very bullish on blockchain technology. I think that's the big revolution. Crypto for me personally, I'm not positive. I'm not as bullish maybe as you. I think short term for sure. Long term, I don't know. I'm still kind of on the fence on that. So.
It's such a fast moving space, and it's so experimental that you definitely have to be very particular with your predictions. And I think that at the risk of going off on too long of a tangent, it is tough to talk about, when people say the blockchain space, or I'm passionate about blockchain, I always say, okay, well, which blockchain? Because the comparison I like to make is that blockchain it's a tool, just like an internal combustion engine is a tool, and that if you take an internal combustion engine, you can put it into the chassis of a car or a bus or a motorcycle or an airplane or a speedboat, and you can get a different vehicle that accomplishes something totally different. And I think with the blockchain as well, it's much the same thing, that you can have a cryptocurrency or a smart contract network or any of these other different possibilities. So it's hard to make predictions as a whole. I think that Bitcoin will be at or above $30,000 by the end of the year. So there's a hard and fast prediction for it.
Okay. And this is May the 4th, 2018, once again, for all you viewers out there. So we'll see. We'll have Jonathan on the show again, and we'll talk about it. We'll see where we're at.
That'll be great. Well, thanks for having me, Roger. It was a real pleasure talking with you. I appreciate the opportunity. No,
of course, man. Thanks for coming on, Jonathan. You're definitely a kick-butt cryptopreneur. And I appreciate you coming on this show. I'll definitely have you back again. And yeah, I guess that wraps it up for today. Thanks to all of you for showing up and watching the episode today.